All right, we're back. It's COMP228. It's week 5, lesson 5, part 1, and we're beginning a broadcast for today. It's Java programming, and this week we're going to do a combined lesson of inheritance this morning and polymorphism this afternoon. Now, this is all stuff you've done before, right? It's not like you haven't. We haven't discussed inheritance and polymorphism in the past with C# in your COMP228 class. So it's not like this is a new thing for you, right? So all we're doing is we're going to go over the idiosyncrasies that we find here in Java. So in Java, right, we have a slightly different syntax than we would in C#, right? I'm just going to wait till we're finished talking so we can continue. Hi. Yeah. Thank you. So what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about how it's going to look in Java. Again, I'm going to bring up Eclipse just for our starter today. Last day, of course, we're COMP228 lesson 4. And this is great practice for you when you do your practical exam, which is going to be in a couple of weeks after you get back. So this week will be the last teaching week, remember, before the break. Next week, it's Thanksgiving week. It's also a break, reading week for you guys and girls. So, so again, we're sitting at week 5 officially. When we come back, it'll be week 6, the official week 6 of the semester. And then, so the week after we get back will be your final or your midterm exam, which will include some kind of practical component, right? So it's really great to practice by pulling up your Eclipse, and that way you're, and you follow along with me as opposed to watching. Watching is bad, you know, doing is good, right? So that way when I ask you to do something in class, you have experience doing it on your own, right? I know some of you work together in teams, and that's great. But the best way to do well on an exam that's practical is to know the system, the tools that you're going to be using, and have practice doing it. Okay, so let's start off today, and we're going to talk about inheritance and polymorphism. So it's a good opportunity for us to create some classes that we can work with. Okay, so let's start off by creating a new project. So we're going to say File, New, Java Project, right? And we're going to call this again COMP228. It's the same kind of thing we've been doing. Lesson 5. That's what we're going to be calling it, right? Again, I'm using Java SE 1.8. Please try and stick with that one. I know there are other options out there. I'm going to click Finish just to create the project baseline. And again, I have a source file or source folder. I'm going to go New, Class. I'm going to create a driver class that I like to call Program. Again, you can call it something that's related to what we're doing. But let's just call it Program to keep it simple. The program class. Again, it inherits, and this is where it's going to change today. It inherits from the Java Lang object superclass. Right? We're going to change that later on as we go forward, but let's just keep it as such, and let's include this public static void main as a way of you know, starting off. Okay, so just a regular thing we normally do. All right, cool. So we've got this. Let's add some coding. So this will be our commenting, and so we're going to say. So this is a driver class. That's what it is. So the driver class for our code. Just putting in some stuff in here. And this, if you notice, is there's no constructor for a static class, but this is our main method, right? So main method, right? And it's static. Right, so that means that it's like a container. It doesn't have to be instantiated in an object. Again, just review again, right? And in here is where we're going to call our other classes in here. Okay, just to start off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continually upload to GitHub. And some of you have expressed concern that you don't know how to do things via, you know, to do things in GitHub. Again, there's a few different methods you can use. You can certainly use command line, right? So you can bring up your command line tools, whether it's terminal or command, terminal for the Mac or Linux. You know, if you're using a command prompt for Windows, you can do it through command prompt or terminal. You could do it that way. You could also use the downloadable tool from GitHub, right? That's the other way. The way I've been showing you is to do it through Eclipse, because with eGit as a plugin, right? And that's what I'd ask you to do. Now, the thing with GitHub is it's a good idea to set up your repository ahead of time. So let's do that. So we'll say GitHub. Hopefully we'll set it up in the right place this time. And we'll say eCentennial or Centennial. Sorry, I'll be okay. I kind of created the Centennial College one, right? And I want to create a new repository here, which I'm going to do. It's going to be called COMP, same name, COMP228 lesson 5. And I'm going to create a new repository here. I'm not going to include any git ignores or anything else. If I want to, I can later. But for now, I'm going to leave these blank. And by the way, if you notice, there's a git ignore file. What it does is it ignores certain idiosyncrasies of the language. And if I pull them up, if you notice, there's all kinds of different things you can pull up. One of them would be Java, right? And if I click the Java git ignore file, right, what this does is it ignores certain hidden files we don't need, right? This is okay to add. Let's add this in. Here's my git ignore file. Here's my initialize this repository with a README. Let's do that. Let's add a README this time. We'll do it a little bit differently. And I can also choose a license. If I was going to license my software, I could certainly choose different kinds of licenses, whether I want to make a public license or whatever. We're not going to choose a license, but you certainly could. I'm going to create a repository here. When I do that, it automatically creates a README file. Here's my README file, right, which is COMP228 lesson 5. If I ever want to go in and modify this, right, I could click on the readme.md file that comes with it. And if I click the edit little pencil here in the README file, I could edit it online. So I could add in something like repo for COMP228 Java programming lesson 5 at Centennial College, right? So you could add some details like that, or other. A lot of times the README is used for instructions on how to install an API, or instructions on how to install your project or whatever. For us, we're just making it just a note to see what this repo is about. That's also what they're used for. And I'm going to go back to my main lesson. If you notice, I got a bit of descriptive information here about my repo. Well, this is great. I want to link it to my files, but I have a bit of a problem now. My repo, right, is a little bit incompatible with my my files. Okay, how do I update it? I'm doing it the other way around as opposed to the way I did it before, right? I know I need COMP228 lesson 5, this whole repo, to be linked to the one I have in my system. So I'm going to navigate to where I know where my system exists, which I know it's in courses under COMP228, right? And if I look there, I have a workspace. Usually that's where we keep all of our stuff. And if I do a listing, I'm like, uh-oh, where's my stuff? Like if I go to lessons, this is interesting. It says workspace, Tom. Look at look where it's taking me, by the way. If I do a path to see what my workspace, a PWD would be the path, right? If you notice, Tom courses COMP2068. That's not what I want. That's not the proper workspace, is it? That's wrong. I went to the other course. Let's try this again. So I'm going to go back up one, and I go back another one. And if you notice, I'm in here. Workspace has a special meaning. So I'm going to go into COMP228. Oops, let's try that again. And inside there, I have workspace, right? So if I want to go into the special, the exact space, what I want to do, even if I do CD workspace here for the Mac, sometimes what it'll do, if you notice, it takes me into a different workspace, a different space. Be aware where you're going when you plot your stuff, because you need to be very specific. So I want to go into actually users, Thomas, courses, in this particular case, COMP228, right? Workspace, which is not, should stop me. With my workspace, that's where it is. Workspace. Right? And if I do PWD again, it's now correct, right? So this is my workspace, and I can see my two lessons, COMP228 lesson 5 and COMP228 lesson 4. Sometimes you have to be very specific on the Mac or on a PC. Sometimes it redirects you. Be very aware of that. So I'm going to go into the actual folder, COMP228 lesson 5, which is what I'm doing today, right? And then when I do that, I can do a listing, and I notice that there's two folders like I normally have, right? Just to get a bit of enrichment here for you guys, little ancillary technology. So I got a bin folder and a source folder. I know my files are in my source folder. I want to connect my folders together, right? Connect my folders together. And the way I do that, of course, is to declare a remote. So when I git add remote, right? Git add remote, and I want to create it so that way when I want to link this folder to this folder. That's what I would like to do. Okay, how do I do that? Well, if you don't know how to do it, you can always say, well, git add remote. How do I do that? I know that's what I wanted. Here's my GitHub documentation, and it gives you some information on how to do this, right? You can kind of it gives you the actual line, git add remote origin, right? As an example, you could do that. You can also add origin, and then here's the remote, right? This is the remote of the Git repository. You can notice that that's how it's done. And there's different ways. If you also have a problem finding this stuff or don't know what to do, and you don't know that git remote add is what you're supposed to do, git remote add and the origin, whatever it is, you can also, if you're lazy, kick off a new repository that's empty. And let me show you how that works. Let's make a new repository here. And this is why we didn't get that information at first, right? And I'm gonna make a test, test repo, and we'll make it under our Centennial College test repo, right? And for just create a repository. And if you notice down here, it gives you this, git remote add, and then whatever it is, right? So it'll give you the commands to do, right? I need to do this though, this git remote add for my previous repo. So first of all, let's destroy this one. How do I destroy a repo? I would go to settings. I'm going to go down to danger zone where it says delete this repository. And then I want to take the name of the repository, test repo, right? And kind of populate it in here, test repo. And then I understand, and that repo is gone. So I've shown you how to add a repository and destroy one. Now we got to add our repository to this one. So remember, it's git remote add origin and then the path, right? We have to be very careful that the path is correct. Well, how do I get that path? Let's go back. So I'm going to go back to Centennial College, which is where my repository is, and I look at here's lesson 5, and in here on the right where it says HTTPS, this is important. This gives you the path right here, right? So you don't have to do any guesswork right on the corner here, right? So I'm going to copy this thing, and I'm going to go back to my repo or my local file here and add it in, right? So it's manual. We're doing it this way, right? So I'll type in this, git init, right? That's the first thing I need to do, right? So initialize the workspace as a repository. Next, git add dot, which adds everything in the directory, in the folder, right, to the repo. All right. That's the next thing I got to do, right? Okay. I also want to stage, so everything is staged yet so far, right? Let's do this. Let's do, before we do a git commit, an initial repo and all that kind of stuff, let's do this. Let's go. I can also do git remove dot, right? If I go, I want to remove with a -r. If I want to add things or remove things, I can go git remove dot. I think it might be git -r. Remove dot. I could do that too. Or git rm -r dot. I could do that as well, so it removes everything. Either way, you can add or remove things on command line if you do it right. Remove dot -r. Right? One of them. And -f to force removal. -f. There we go, right? So now everything's removed, but I still have my repository initialized, right? Now let's add the remote. So git remote add, and then I'm going to kind of paste in my path. That's the first thing I'm going to do, right? So there it is. And then it says this. It says remote add and the name, right? And it says usage, right? So git remote add and then options and the name or URL. I missed origin. That's what I should probably add in there. Otherwise, I'm not going to have a name, right? So here's my remote add the name, origin, and then enter, right? So there we go. I got my remote. I want to do I already have a readme and a git ignore. I want to pull those down first before I do anything else. I want to say git pull, if I've done everything correctly, it says, hey, there's no tracking information on the current branch. Please specify which branch you want to merge with, right? For details. And if I want to say git pull remote branch is what I have to do. So I'm going to say git pull remote, right? Whatever it is, and the branch master, right? So that would be the one I want to use, right? So if I would just say master, right? It says, hey, master does not appear to be a Git repository. Let's try that again, right? So git pull and the remote. So I'm going to just put that in there. Again, master. There we go, right? Now I've got the head, right? And if I do a list, I have a README. What happened to my project? My project is gone, right? So why did it happen like that? Anyone, any ideas? I made a project, now it's gone. Anybody? Huh? I removed it, right? I didn't remove them by the git remove dot. I didn't do that. I just unstaged them all. What happened when I pulled down files, because my Git repository looks a certain way, it looks like this, right? And it merged the change, right? So if I was to, I can't, there's no change here remotely. If I refresh, it looks the same. There's no link. All I have is these two files, an initial commit and a README file. Well, I've killed my project, yeah? Killed my project. I'm just pointing this out just in case you go like, I don't know how to use Git. This is terrible, blah, blah, blah. How do I revert? In command line. So I want to revert back to my previous thing. Well, that's kind of hard. If I go ls, I only have these two things. But if I go ls minus al, I can notice that there is a git folder here, right? A git actual folder. That's a directory. See the D in front of it if you know Linux. And we're looking at a directory, a git repository, a git directory that's hidden. And that's what exists on the Windows side as well. So if I go to cd.git, and if I do a list, I can see there's a head, there's some branches, there's an index, there's objects, there's hooks, there's all kinds of other stuff that I've got in here. So if I go to branches and I do a list, I can see that there's no additional branches. I can also look to see if there's a way that I can retrieve my information. Now, I tell you right now, there's probably not going to be, because I want to revert. So let's say if I don't know how to do it, I'm going to go to line to say I'm going to say git revert. How do I do revert those changes? And if you notice, if I go to the git revert documentation, it tells me how I can step back, git revert, right, as an example. And then I need to know I need to point to a commit that I previously did to revert back. I don't have a commit. That's the problem. My commit, as an example, locally, it doesn't exist, right? Because I didn't have one. And if I was to show you this, if I go to git status, it's going to say everything's fine. We're on master branch. We're clean. Git log shows me I have two commits. One that's an initial commit that was made by when I created the folder, the directory online, and another one that's the README file that I added in. All right. So some issues, right? We're trying to figure out how to add this in without with getting back our files. Now, luckily, all we had was two files. Imagine if I had gone further. By the way, I knew that was going to happen. So let's see what happens to our folder. Well, somehow it's still showing me online in Eclipse. It's still showing me a source file. There's nothing in there right now. And that's interesting. One thing it's not doing, if I go to team, share project with Git, right? And here it is. This is my Git project. I can go finish because it's a Git repository. You would think that you'd be forgiven to think that this is the way it is. The problem is that even though it's a Git repository, it doesn't know. Eclipse doesn't know until you actually do what I just did. Now I know I have a README file, but now my bin and my everything else is gone. I don't have a bin and I don't have a source file. So is there a way I can recreate these two things without killing my project if I was going to work it from scratch? The answer is yes, there is. But in our particular case, it's out of scope for what we're going to do. This is going to take a lot longer for us to fix this problem. But I'm going to show you this is the bad way or wrong way to do it. So let's do it another way. All right, so here's my comp lesson 5, comp 2, whatever. Let us delete this thing. I'm going to go back in here for a second. And I'm going to skip back out into workspace. Here's my lesson 5. So you can see that it's still there. I'm going to remove it from Eclipse. I'm going to go right click. And sometimes you get an error where it says, hey, do you want to remove it? And it says delete project contents on disk cannot be undone. At this point, I really don't care. There's nothing else that's in there that's really important. So let's just delete it, right? It says review the information, blah, 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 blah. It says click continue to proceed. I do, bye-bye. So now it's gone. Okay. Let's go back to the actual folder and do a list command and see if it's there. It's gone, right? So that's a pretty good thing. But I still have my repository online. So if I wanted to get it back, I just have to pull my repository and I got everything back, right? My repository is useless for me right now, and I've kind of done this on purpose to show you there's problems doing it this way, right? All right, so let's delete this thing. So I'm going to go back into settings. This is my repository online. So if you link to it, it's going to delete it. And I'm going to go into COMP228 lesson 5. I'm going to copy this, put it in here. I'm showing you the delete second time in a row, so you see how it's done. And it's gone, right? Let's go and add a new repository this time and make it empty, which is the right way to do things. So COMP228. And I'll say lesson 5, again, same name. But I'm not going to add a README or git ignore for now. Let's just create a repository. Cool. There's my README, and there's the instructions that I need if I was going to do command line. But I'm not going to do command line, am I? I'm going to use my tool. That's the best way to do it. So let's go File, New, Java Project. And in my Java project, I'm going to do the same thing, COMP228. So if I can do this properly. And it's going to be lesson 5. And now I've got my Java project in there, and I'm going to add that file in there really quickly to get us back to where we were before. So I'm not going to go through all the steps, just do it. Call program, and make sure that, oh, sorry, that's my Java project. I don't want to do another Java project. I want to add another class, I'll be okay, and which is program, and one of those, click those. Go over here and say my program driver class, and this is my static main method, right? To the class itself, which I'm going to do all my work in today. Get rid of this. I'm going to save it, and now I'm going to connect through here. So I'm going to go right-click, add to team, share my project, choose Git, go next. Right, I'm going to choose a directory. This is the path right here, and where it says, create, I'm going to click create. I'm not going to choose the location in here. I'm not going to choose a repository that's already there. I'm just going to create a repository here. I'm going to choose the location of where I'm pointing to. So I'm going to go back out. I'm going to go to courses, exactly where I have my workspace. I'm going to go to 228. I'm going to go down to workspace. I'm going to go into COMP228 lesson 5. This is where my repository is going to be. And I'm going to press open and finish. It's going to give me an error, but I'm going to ignore it and press cancel because now it's created the Git repository with no head. Right? And now I need to go right click. I'm going to go team. I'm going to commit for the first time. And in my commit message, I'm going to say initial commit. There it is. I'm going to add everything into my initial commit, these two things as well, my settings, my source, my programs, my git ignore file. Notice it's there already. I don't have to add it in, right? And I'm going to commit and push, and it's going to be called, the remote name is going to be origin for now, but when I copy, if I go back to here, if I copy this path, which is the URI, and I put it here into my URI, it knows what I want, right? GitHub and the link to GitHub. I'm going to click next, next again, and finish. And when I do that, and I haven't pressed any other options here, and now I've got my first commit. And if I go back to here and refresh on GitHub, I'm back to where we were many times. We've done this before. And this is where if I have a git ignore file and a project file and a class path and my source folder with my program.java file, which is my first driver class that I'm going to be using, right? So this is where everything exists, just in case you guys are all curious. Okay, now I want to add a README. Would I mess it up if I added a README now? Let's try it. I'm going to add a README, and I'm going to do the same thing as I did last time. I'm going to say repo for COMP228 Java programming at Centennial. Okay, there we go. So then I've done this. I'm going to hit the new file. I'm one commit ahead, and I've got to catch up. So now here in the terminal, you know what it is. I can go do it here. I can go into COMP228, right? Lesson 5, and if I do a git status, I see that there is git. If I get git log as an example, here it is. I see that I've got one initial commit here, but I don't have the one that's online where I added in my README. I could do a git pull from here, or I can do it from the tool. Let's go through the tool again. So git, go to my team, and if you notice, there is a pull command right here inside my Eclipse. I could do it here, so I'm going to pull. And when I do that, it says, hey, here's a master. I'm going to move my branch forward to the new commit, which is the README file. It actually read it online. And as once I press OK, then I pull it down. So I've got my README file, and it's right here, right? So this is my README file now, which is right in here. So I can do everything from the tool. I don't have to leave the tool to do everything. Eclipse does everything for me for those people who are curious. All right, so that's good. That's a good kind of a good intro into how I set things on my environment up for those people who were asking questions. They're like, Tom, I don't know how to use Git. I'm getting confused. My Git doesn't work. La 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 la. Right? I've heard it about 10 times so far. And it's going to become more important as we move forward because I'm going to ask you to do stuff with Git. Okay. All right, so what do we do? We're talking about inheritance today to start off. And with inheritance, right, remember what we did in C# with inheritance. We created a class and then almost like a superclass. And then we can inherit from that superclass and to make more specific classes that have almost like a specialized reason for being. So let's think about this, this class, the first class we're going to make, and we're going to make a new class here. So we're going to go into our default package, right? I'm going to right click and I'm going to go a new class. Let's do this together, right? And this default class that I'm adding in, right, as an example, it's going to be called the person class. We'll do the person class example, right? We could also have done, the planet class like we did before in C#. Actually, I might do that later on as an additional example. But let's do the person class. And notice that I'm still using my superclass as the Java Lang object superclass, right? I'm not going to click anything else here, and I'm going to press OK, finish. So when I do that, I have a new class that's inside my default package called person. Right now, the person class, let's think about a person class. By the way, this is the superclass that we're going to be using that we'll use for this example, right? So we have a person class, which is our superclass. We need to make a constructor. So again, guide me through here. I'm going to pull up some stuff here so you guys, I know some people like this kind of thing when I do it. Some people hate it, but hey. Let's pull up concept board for those people who want to join me on concept board. If you want to be anonymous, I'm going to kind of kick off a board here just for you guys today. We're going to make this, we're going to call this board COMP228, right? So there's our COMP228. I'm going to put in a sticky for this board. Here's my sticky note that I'm going to kind of put together for COMP228, and we're just going to call it, so you see where it is, COMP228 discussion, we're going to say, for today. And for those of you who remember how to do that, all you need to do is join me. I'm going to share this board here on Twitter. By the way, I've opened up Twitter for you guys so you guys can do this for this semester. I'm saving it on Twitter, where it's going to say, hey, join me on concept board. Here's the link for it. That's what I'm doing. And of course, where's my Twitter? For those people who don't know where it is if I can get rid of this, it is under at my last name, right? So if you go at my last name, that's my handle. You can certainly find me there, and then you'll see the link that you can join concept board. All right. So I'm asking you to join concept board not as a requirement, but because in that way you can feel comfortable joining, and you won't feel that you're. I don't want you to be afraid to ask questions or put something up here that's wrong. It's a great way of learning, because if you put something up's wrong, I'm not going to get mad. You're not going to get marked on this. So it's an opportunity for you to pop something up, even if you think it's right but it's wrong, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. All right, so there's the test. Someone's testing it out. So how do I do this? What I'm asking for is, what's the next step? I want to add a constructor, right, to my person class. Here's my person class. What do I do? And again, as a review of what we did last time, what should I call it? What are the access modifiers? This kind of thing. And let's also ask for some other opportunities. If you go up on concept board, maybe think about what a person should have. So put a little class example, just like copy and paste this stuff as an example. So I can copy out of Eclipse. Let's say I'll copy it in here, and I'll pop it up on concept board, just this basic stuff. So let's say someone's already started. I'm gonna kind of put this in here, in my sticky, right? I'm gonna kind of control, actually maybe I'll make a new one here. I'll make a new one, right? So that way I can, you know, I'll add a new sticky note here with a different color. If you notice, I can choose different colors. Make it blue for this one. Oh, I chose mine. All right, it's fine. I don't care. Let's go back to yellow for a second. So I'm going to make a new sticky board with that's blue. Sorry, and with a background that's white. And I'm going to kind of double click inside there and paste. And now it's centered, which doesn't make any sense to me. But I want to make it so that it's towards the. Oh, someone erased it. Thanks, guys. It happens, right? It happens, right? And I'm going to kind of paste it. Please don't do that again, because it's a waste of time for us. Please don't do it again, right? Because that would be bad. If you're doing this, then it's just waste everyone's time. We don't want to play here. So take this, and I want you to take there. Someone's got an example of stuff that's on here. You know, we've got some examples here. I'm going to pull this out so we can see it. And there's more stickies. I'm going to kind of, you know, bring them in a little bit. There we go. By the way, these aren't stickies. These are actual comments, if you will. So you can, this is not what I'm asking you to do. These are just comments. I'm going to pull them aside for you guys because you're just pulling things. A sticky is in the middle, and you do that by create. And you can click a text box, a sticky note, a headline, whatever you want, or a comment, right? All right, so I don't want any of those things. So this is what I want you to think about. So someone's coming up with some stuff. Public class person. The person's name. So person is the class name. String name, so name of the person, and an age, and maybe a social insurance number. Okay, that's cool. SIN. I don't know if that would really be every person, though. Some people wouldn't have. The set of all persons may not include a social insurance number, because if they don't live in Canada, it might be called something else, right? So maybe you want to remove that. Here's one. Public class person. Here's some private instance variables. I like the coding there. And then private int underscore age. That's good. So there's some people are starting to think about it, what they're going to add in. You know, to the class, right? So think about super that we'll use, for example. Someone. All right, so we're just going to just do one of these. So let me start writing some of the stuff I'm seeing. So if I'm going on here, not in Eclipse, I want to add some other things in here that I want to talk about. So maybe, again, I probably would do something like private instance variables, just like you guys said. So here's instance variables, right? So I could start typing in there, like for what you guys are saying. I'm kind of taking what you're giving me. I like the age because I think everyone has an age, and I like the name. That might be two things that were in here. So let's add them in. So we'll say so private, you know, and again it would be int underscore age, which will make a separate as private. I'm just putting in different lines because different types. String underscore name. So there's a couple things we got there. So a couple things. And then maybe some kind of constructor. I like the constructor that we've chosen. So let's double click in here. And we'll do something like, all right. We'll call this the person, right? And here's the constructor. And inside the person, a constructor, we'll add in a string. We'll add a string name. That's the first thing we want. And then the age, like we talked about before. So int, and then age, and then a height. Okay, I like height. Height, everyone has a kind of height. Some people, even if you're a short person, you still have a height. Even if you're a baby, you still have a height. So that's good. That makes sense. So I'm initializing my height here as well. So that means I need a height. I need some kind of height private variable. So maybe it's going to be an integer. I don't know. Let's leave it as integer. We may change that to something else later on. Height. I probably think it might be better off as a float because a height if you have a, you know, it's not going to be, you're not going to be exactly 1 foot tall. You're not going to be exactly, unless you do it in inches, right? And this way, and if I do it in inches or in feet, or feet will not work, but inches, if I want to just go to the inches, I might say height in inches, right? I could do kind of a variable name like that, right? If I wanted to go into that, right? You see where I'm going, right? I want to add a basic person. Let's take what I've got here that I've kind of just got from you guys and a bit of mine, right? And go back into Eclipse and then just paste and see what I get. So I'm going to kind of paste below just to be safe. So there it is. And I want to take some of this stuff here that I've got. For example, I've got my person, you know, constructor, as well as some of this. I'm going to take this off. So I'm going to Control X and Control V. And here's my person constructor, which I'll make into a code block by doing like one of those. Now I can kill this one. And now I've got some instance variables here with a person class. Do I need to be explicit and put public? How about void? Do I have to put a void in there?
No.
Right? I don't have to, right? Because by default, my constructor is public, right? If I don't do my constructor as public, if I try, it'll give me an error, right? So constructor is my first constructor. I can make constructors if maybe I'm going to have more than one. I don't know yet, right? But for now, I only have one constructor, and it asks for my string name, my int, and my height. I'm going to initialize these. Maybe I'll initialize them here. So for the first time, I'll say this dot underscore name, right? This dot underscore name is equal to name. So my name of the person. This dot underscore, maybe we'll say the age, right? And the age of the person is equal to age. And this dot underscore height in inches is equal to the height of the person, right? So let's say is equal to height. And maybe what I want to do is call this the same thing, height in inches. You know, so I want to put a height in inches, another value. And again, we haven't done any kind of validation here to get those values. I'm just kind of assuming that the person's going to add them in. We don't care about the weight so much because, you know, that might be variable. Height in inches, although people do have a weight or a mass if we're going to be, you know, think about it as a physical object, right? So we can probably add that into, so probably can move float an underscore mass, right? And again, I don't know if it's a mass in pounds. If we're going to go inches, we might go pounds, right? Mass in pounds as opposed to mass in kilograms. If we're going to go kilograms, it might as well be height in meters, right? Which is, you know, we have to kind of match up the sim. So let's say mass in pounds. You could do that. Again, it's a descriptive variable, right? You want to make it, and I might as well ask that here as well. If I'm asking for my height, I might as well ask for my weight. And instead of an int, that's wrong. It should be a float, right? I'm asking for a float, and same thing with here because they've got to match the type, right? So I'll say mass in pounds, and then of course I'm going to initialize it here the same way. This that underscore mass in pounds is equal to mass in pounds. Now, why am I using this? Why is this working? Because when I declare this in my constructor, anything that's here in my constructor, although they look the same, name, age, height in pounds, height in inches, mass in pounds, they are local variables that only live and die inside this code block, inside the constructor, right? So even though I'm making them the same name as these ones, that's why I've underscored these ones, right? To make them even more private variables, right? Even if they were the exact same, age, name, height in inches, and mass in pounds, instead of underscore, 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 it still would be different because I've got private class variables here, and I've got local variables here that I want to take the values from here and put them here. All right, cool. I think that might be good. Like, you know, so just for now, name, age, height in inches, mass in pounds. All right, I need some basic methods that all people in the person classes do, right? So what do? We eat, right? Let's say we probably do that. We need to eat. We need to other things too. We're not going to mention those, the unmentionables, right? We're not going to mention the unmentionables here, right? But we're going to mention some other basic things, like somehow we walk, we might run, we might talk. Those things are the things we can all do, right? So I think we can add these methods, and we'll call them public methods that we all do, right? Public methods. So again, I would say public void for now, right? That we want to kind of add in a public void method that we're going to call eats, right? And I'm going to make it lowercase for now, right? And so a person eats, right? And when a person eats, we're going to say system.out.println, just for this example. The person's name, right? We'll say like this, the person's name, this._name. We'll concatenate it with space is eating, right? Or I can say eats, whatever you decide, whatever is happy for you, right? And a semicolon. So that's what eating does for us, right? Let's build another one. Let's do, we have eats, we have public void, right? We have eats, we have walks, right? We walks. I'm not going to do the unmentionables, like we said, that's bad, right? So there's other things people do. This._name, we'll send again, is walking. It's walking. And we'll do one more. Public void. So eating, walking, and talking, let's say. Talks. Or speaks. Maybe speaks. This is a little differently. Speaking and talking. Kind of the same. Oops, there's a bit of an error there. And let's do another system.out.println this_, oops, name plus is speaking. Oops, there we go. All right, so we've got a basic outline for a very simple class. It's a person class. We're all, if in this room, if we were going to define ourselves, we are all people, right? That's normal for us to be all people. But each one of us has, we're different kinds of people, right? Or some of us, I'm a professor, you are students, we're still people, but we have different specializations, right? We can even go further than that, right? I'm male, you are female people, right? Some of you, and some of you are male people as well. We all belong to the same, some same other subclasses. If you wanted to go there, I don't think that's a viable subclass though, to be honest with you. I think if we were gonna put gender, we might wanna put it up here, right? For now though, let's leave gender out of it, right? Because we don't need to, again, there's certain things we can put in, many more properties we can use for our example, but I think this is enough. But let's think about other specializations. So we're students or teachers, maybe we are employees, you know, or workers. Maybe can we be employees and teachers? That kind of works. The set of all employees, I qualify, right? Set of all employees and the set of all teachers, I kind of I'm in both of those sets, right? If we're talking about sets. I'm also in the set of all people, persons, right? So I think person and employee and teacher can all work together, right? They don't clash, and they have specializations in each one of them, right? Is there something that goes before student? You know, is there, you got the set of all people, and then it goes right to student. Is there something else that could be something that you're, you know, another thing there? First of all, for people who are behind, let us update. Let me save everything here. I'm going to save my stuff, and I'm going to go into, I'm going to look at the project, and I'm going to go file or right-click team. I'm going to make a commit here, right? And I'm going to say added person class, right? Here's my added person class. I'm going to click on person. I have to click on this in order for me to do a commit. I'm going to commit and push so you have everything that I have, right? So now you have my person class. It's online, right? We certainly could add in getters and setters. For example, if I want to add in a getter and setter to change my age, let's say as an example, as I age and I want to keep track of a person, you would change your age. If you're younger and you get older, you might change your height in inches and mass in pounds. And you might even want to decide to change your name, right? So that's all the stuff that we might have, right? So we might all of us yet must have or may have a way of adding all these things or changing them, because it makes sense that all of these things are variables. They're not constants. You may never have may never change your name, or and so on, but your age is always going to change. Every moment of every day, your age is changing, right? And your height in inches and mass in pounds slightly shifts along your life, right? So that would change. So if you were going to track a person's properties over time, you would need getters and setters, all right? So let's add that in. And the quick way to do that, of course, is to click above the constructors. I only have one. And I'm going to go into, I want to add this in. So again, how would I do that? Do you remember how? So if I go to source, and if I go to generate getters and setters, right here it goes, generate getters and setters. And it's going to ask me, what do you want to generate? I want to add them all from my age and my height in inches and mass in pounds. I need to make some changes here because I don't like the way it names them. But that's okay, because at least it gives me some information about how to do this. So let's just add all these in, right? So I'm going to kind of add them all in, and here they are. And it gives me some basics. I want to kind of erase some of this stuff. But I want to put in a note up here that says getters and setters. What are the other names for getters? There's actually a special name for getters, right? That we talked about before. It's not not just called getters. Anyone have an idea? I'm going to go to concept board and see if you guys can think about a name. Someone put a whole class in here. Wow. Position X and Y. All kinds of stuff. Someone's fooling around with me. Okay, good. And a delta. That's good. That's good. I liked it. But what's another word for a getter? That's what I'm asking for. So let's just kill this now. I don't care about this anymore. And we'll add a new sticky note here to describe what I want to do, which is make it green this time. There we go. Another name for getters and setters. Right, so what other names are there when we describe stuff? Let's see what they come up with. Here are getter accessor methods. So that's neat. So actually getters are called accessors, right? Accessors. What about the setters? What's another word to describe setters? Anybody have another word for that? There is another word. We talked about it actually in one of my PowerPoints. And I kind of mentioned it in one of the videos, right? And I tested you on it too. Mutators. Thank you. So they're mutators. So we are all mutants then, right? Because even though we're people, and we're mutants. If I add all the changes, we're slightly different than everyone else. Everyone is their own unique person, right? So accessors and mutators. Accessors are the things we use as getters, and setters we mutate. They're mutators that mutate our class, change our class. That's what they do. Let's go back. So that's cool. So I say getters and setters, and I have they're all public, right? Because we want again, best practices, private instance variables, public properties. So we can also call these properties. That's what these are. That's what, these are also called properties in other places. I don't like this get age and set age and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to rename this stuff. So I'm going to say get age. I'm going to start resetting everything else, and then I'll populate it all in GitHub for you, so you don't have to work so hard. But you can also follow along. So set age, and I encourage you to do so. And get name. And the reason why I'm using that, I don't like the underscore or underscore kind of way of doing things. That's not my convention. I use camel case for this stuff. Set name. And if you notice, the getters and the setters are all kind of bunched together. Some people also separate them. They say, I want to put all my getters together, all my setters together. Some people can combine them. So getters and setters of one type of variable, and then getters and setters of another type of variable. That's perfectly fine as well. I'm okay with all those things. Almost done. And voila. All right, let's take a look at all this stuff, right? Go back to the first setter. It returns age. Okay, that's not what I want. It should be this dot underscore age. I want to use this keyword as much as possible. This one, it took age with an underscore as a default. I don't want that. It's just your regular age. Again, that's what I want to do. Return this dot name. I want to make sure that it follows my convention, and you should do the same. Even though it saved you some time, you certainly should align things to your own style of doing things, and this is my style. So I can recognize my writing, the way I do things, right? And you should do the same. So when you do your style, it's consistent. Make sure you're consistent among your the way you do stuff, and that way you can tell if you've made a mistake. You can go back and correct. And someone who reads your work will be able to also appreciate the fact that you've got a consistency about the way you do your stuff. Remember, this is almost like your little essay, right? This is your poetry, right? The stuff you're putting here. All right. You might think I'm crazy, but this is poetry for you, right? So when you do poetry, you want to keep, you know, your artistic sense consistent, even for poetry. Okay, so here it is. I'm going to file save if I haven't done it already, and I'm going to go back into here, and I'm also doing another push. I'm going to go team, and I'm going to do a commit, and I've modified my person file again by added getters and setters. That's what I've done, right? Because I want to kind of do that, commit and push. Right, so now my class is even more complete. By the way, it's up on GitHub for those people who couldn't follow along so fast. Right, you can certainly go up on GitHub and grab my changes to my person class. Here we go. Right, I'm going to be testing you on this on the midterm exam. Right, so when we do a person class and example in class together, right, there's examples in the book. Right, I'll be referring to those as well. But there's examples in class that we do together. Right. Please defer to the examples in class for the stuff we do in the midterm, because I'll be asking you questions. I may even ask you to create a person class or do something with the person class. And if you're doing things in class with me and you've done these examples, then it's not going to be a problem for you. If you don't do things in class and you don't follow along, it'll be a trouble, right? Because you won't have done this before. So I've got getters and setters. I've got my private instance variables. I've got my constructor here, only one, and a bunch of methods. This is a typical, very slim, by the way, a very short class, right? Okay, it looks like long, but it's really not that long. Okay, cool. The next piece, in order for me to kick off my, by the way, there's problems. I want to point out that when I do inheritance, remember, we're not going to, there's no tricks here, right? What is a problem you guys see? You guys know C#, you've done inheritance before. I want to defer to people who know. What's the problem that I have here in my class right now, the way I've defined it? If I want to have subclasses of this class, what could be a potential block for me? Anybody? How about smart people like Ravina, who's, you know, I'm going to click on someone this time, a no concept point. Ravina, what is a potential block for me when we look at this thing? You know, you're pretty good at knowing this. Can you guess? What would you recommend? Abel, what about you? Any idea? Any idea? What could be a problem here? I'm just leaving this. Actually, it's actually in your face right now. If you look at the screen, what could be a problem here? The way I've written this, right, for future subclasses, right? Remember, a subclass is a derivative of the superclass. This is my superclass. My subclass would be derived from this class. What could be a potential issue? Well, private would be the issue, right? Private means it's available to the class itself, right? But I might want to use something else, another access modifier. What would it be? Protected, right? So let's type that in. So protected. And protected says I can use it for my subclasses as well. It'll be accessible in my subclasses. I may or may not want to do this because I may or may not want to use my getters and setters, right? Even in my subclasses to access my private variables, right? But I think it might be better for me in this particular case because I know what I want to do protected. You could also mix and match. You can have some that are only private to the person class and some that you're going to share with your subclasses. In this particular case, we're going to make such a subclass or sub stuff that I want access to my other previous stuff. Okay, let's make a subclass. How do I do that in Java? A little bit different than we did it in C#. I'm going to go to my default package. This is new. I'm going to right click and go new, class. When I do this, it's going to say, hey, let's use this superclass, java.lang.object. And I'm going to say, no way. That's not what I want to use. What class do I want to put in here instead of my superclass java.lang.object? First of all, my person is going to be the first one. I want to make a new class, all right? I'm just going to put it up here, right? I'm going to call it resident. And I'm not going to call, if I call it citizen, that may not include some of you, right? So let's say resident. So we're a resident of Canada. We live in Canada, so we're all residents, right? We may not be citizens. That's another class. That's another group of people, right? Most of you will become. Some of you may become citizens at the end. Some of you will not, right? So there's resident. All right. I want to kind of grab this It can't be this. How do I change this? Any idea? In Java, you could certainly type the default here. Or I can go browse, and I can look down here, and I can start typing the name, if I don't know what it is, here by typing person. And if it's inside of my package, my default package, if you notice where it is, or in a package that's accessible, it'll come up with an option, person. So I just double click here. When I do that, or I could have typed just person like this, right? As an example, you will see, right, that I'm going to get this person as the subclass of my, resident is a subclass of the person superclass. And if I press finish, I could do that. Or look what it says here. Which method stubs would you like to create? Public static, constructors from superclass. I could do inherited abstract methods. I don't have any of those yet. And I could generate comments. Let's just press finish for now. Cool, there's my resident class that extends person, and automatically I have an error. Why do I have an error? Well, if you look over for quick fixes, it says add a constructor resident, right? With that asks me for string, int, float, and float, right? This is the stuff that it's going to need. So that's my default method. Let's add that in. Bam, right? String name, int age, float height in inches, float mass in pounds, and look what it's doing. It's calling my superclass first. That's the first thing it gets called. This is standard stuff, even in C#, and it's created my stub for me. Please do it this way, right? This is a very quick and easy way to do it. You certainly could do it by hand, but why work so hard, right? So this is my constructor. So we're gonna put that in. This is my constructor for my my person. My resident subclass. That's what this is. Resident subclass of the person superclass. I'm gonna put this up here so we know what it is, right? Okay, this is my resident. What things does a resident have in Canada that a regular person may or may not have? Social insurance number they might have. I think most of you have, even as residents, you have social insurance numbers, no? Right? So that's something we can put in here. So that's a new thing. We're going to put a new thing that's different than it doesn't exist in the person class. We're being more specialized now. We're adding something new, right? So I'm going to say something like this. I'm saying, okay, well, these are my private instance variables. And oops, if I can type properly. And I'm going to put in a social insurance number, which is probably going to be, I could make it an integer, but I might behoove me to make it a string, right? Because for now it's numbers, but maybe I want to add spaces. Maybe there might be other things in there that need to be different. So even though I say it's a number, it doesn't act like a number. You can't add it. Think about what the use of the variable is. Can I add a social insurance number to something else? Chances are not. Here's another one. Will it ever change? Will my social insurance number ever change in the lifetime of the person that's in Canada? Unless you somehow find someone who does some other funny business out there, right? That changes your personality too, or maybe makes fake ID, right? The answer is no, shouldn't change. Actually, in the States too, shouldn't change. Your social security number, it doesn't change. So what should I do? What kind of special variable, or should I make it a variable here? What? A final, right? So, okay. I need to make it private. I need to make it final. That's neat, all right? Maybe I need to make it, if I make it static, that's going to exist among all of my residents. I can't do that, right? So I'm going to make it private final, and I'm going to make it so if I make it a final, it's like a constant, so I should use the social insurance number, and I'll make it underscore, right? I need to make it some kind of variable as well, which is going to be a string, right? So it's a private final social insurance number, and I need to add a semicolon. Right, good. So that's kind of a new private instance variable that I have, and I've made it final because once I set it, right, it can never be changed. Hold on. Do I have to instantiate it now? Do I have to initialize it now? Because if it's private and final, right, that's a problem, right? Here's something, I got an error. It comes up with an error here. It says, the blank final field social insurance number may not have been initialized. So this is a nice idea. It probably should be final, right? But I can't do it. Why? Because final means it's been finalized, right? So my idea is nice, but I can't do it because it means I need to initialize it here, which means I can't do it. Everyone's going to have the same social insurance number when I make a resident, right? So that's not right. So I like the idea, but I can't add this modifier in here. Okay, cool. So social insurance number is one that I want to change. And that means that in my constructor, not only do I want to add all this stuff, name, age, float for height in inches and mass in pounds, but also now a string. Right, here's my string value, capital S, which is a social insurance number, right? And then what I want to do is I don't need to pass the string, take a look, into my superclass. It doesn't care about that. But I do need to set it here in my constructor for my local resident class, my subclass. So this dot underscore sin, right, is equal to sin, right? Funny that our social insurance number stands for all of our sins, right? All the bad things we do, right? Anyway, so think about that. So we got a constructor, a resident. What can residents do you know, what can residents have? What can they have that non-residents don't have, right? If you're not a resident, an address, right? That makes sense. So an address is maybe more than one part, right? I might make it that it has several strings that have an address. For example, the city, part of your address, right? You know, your you also might have you know, the street, right, and the number, and all that kind of stuff, right? I can enjoy that as well as the province, right? All this extra stuff for a resident. We're making almost like a record for this resident, right, which is also a person, right? So I need all these extra things here. Let's add them in. So we're going to say private. One of them is going to be they're all part of the address, but you know, well, that's almost like, here's something that I can think about. It's almost like another class of its own, isn't it? I'm going to get fancy, right? Let's wait for a second. Let's make another class, right? And here's composition, all right? So I'm going to make composition happen, right? Composition. What's composition, right? When I say composition, I want to compose a class for another class. It means I'm going to use other classes to create objects in my class. That's called composition. And that's another way of a type of inheritance, if you will, that we're using. So let's use another class, make it a little fancy, right? And we're going to call this class the address class, right? Address. That sounds like. Now, is it going to be a derivative of another class? No. So we're going to make it a Java Lang object class again, and we're going to press finish. Here we go. Here's our address class. Address class, right? And if I can spell it properly. And in my address class, I definitely need to have an address constructor, right? Here's my address constructor. Here's my address constructor, and here's my constructor for my address class, constructor, right? We're going to take a break in a second, guys, when we do this stuff. Because we're only talking about inheritance right now. So here's my address constructor, and I need to ask for a couple of things here. Well, my address itself has a few things, a few private instance variables, right? Because there's going to be more than one address. I don't want to type this over and over again, right? And let's make it a comment. How about that, Tom? And these private instance variables are going to be what? There's going to be a street, right? And maybe the street, I recommend all of these should be strings, right? So again, we'll make it a private string, and then we'll say the street number, right? So we'll say underscore street number. Right, here we go, street number. And then a private string that will say street name. Here's street name, and a private string that is, we got string name and number. Maybe we have a unit number, right? Maybe some people might have a suite, right? So that could be optional, right? For now, let's assume that everyone has. All we care about is, just to keep it simple for our example, because we don't have any time. Let's just assume that we just need the street name and number. Okay, we don't need anything else. So we're going to say the city name, and let's add in the string province name, because we live in Canada. Taking a Canadian application, province name. And also, so street, name, number, province is enough. That's good. Okay, so let's get them in there, right? Let's add them into the constructor. So let's go do one of these. We're going to say we need a string. That's a street number, right? We need a string. That's a street name. We need a string. That is a city name. And we need a string. That is a province name. You can live somewhere in Canada. Right? By the way, I could have called the resident class Resident of Canada class, right? But we just made it resident. Okay, and let's go into this dot underscore street name. We're going to assign this for the first time is equal to street name. This is pretty simple. I'm just getting you to practice typing. This dot underscore, oh, I missed street number. Let's have that in before. This dot underscore street number, right, is equal to street number. And this dot underscore city name is equal to city name. This dot underscore province name, I've called province. Province, how about that? Province name is equal to province name. If I did type that properly, I did. There we go. So I got my initializers, right? For my stuff. Is there a method, right, for the address? Is there a method for the address that I may want to use later on, right? What can happen to an address, right? I can change it, yeah? We change addresses frequently. I've moved like about 15 times in my life, right, at least. You know, some people don't move at all. Some people stay in one place forever, right? What was that? I could output the address, maybe a toString function that does it, right? So maybe some kind of toString that outputs the address. I could say address.toString, and then it'll output the address in a very specific function. I may need to do that. So let's do that. Here's something. So I want to remember all objects have the toString function, right? I want to override it. So let's talk about how I can do this. I'm going to make this a public function, which I'm going to call, which is going to return a string, which is going to be the toString function, and I want to return when I go toString, I want to return specific things. So we're going to say system.out.println. Here's my address. So I'm going to say street. So here's my address is going to have the street name, the street number, and the street name, right, in one line. So street number. Let's do, I'm using println for a reason, by the way, and not printf. So street number would be first, followed by a space, followed by street name. So this dot underscore street number, followed by a space, followed by a street name, this dot underscore street name. Right, that's the first thing I want to print out. And then system.out.println. That's one thing I want to print. Oh, wait. Oh, man. I want to return this string. I want to print it, right? So that I can format it the way I want. I could return nothing, right? So when I call the toString function, I could return void, right? I could do that. So if I want to do that, as an example, there's an error. I could make it so it returns void. Now this would be a problem, right? And you're going to see if I hover over it, it says the return type is incompatible with the object.toString function. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a second. Could I override it? Ravina, yes or no?
Yes. Yeah.
Here's a way to do that. @override, right? I want to use my @override to override my object, but still it gives me an error because I have an object that's named the exact same way. It says change return type of string to string. So I still need to do this. I can choose to, it's optional, I can choose to override using the decorator. This is a decorator, @override, right? Or not. for my object superclass? Ravina, what do you think? No? Or what if, instead of system.out.println, right, I can use a string.format, but that doesn't really help me. I can make a local variable, right, that's a string. For example, I can call my local variable called output, right, my local output variable, which I'm going to initialize as nothing, right? And what I can say is, instead of this, right, I could do one of these. I could say, well, output then, output is plus equals to this dot street number dot but this, and then plus at the end, if you want to be really a stickler, backslash n, right? That could be one of those, right? Which kind of gives me a method of doing stuff. This system.out.println, right? It's like that. I'll just keep doing that. Output plus equals. I'll add more. I'll say this on my street name, my street number, my province, and my city. So first I'll do my city. So this dot city name plus a comma and a space, and then plus this dot underscore province name, right? Plus, might as well add in a backslash n just to add in an extra space. How about something else? How about, like, this is your address, like some kind of separator. So let's add that up here. Output plus equals to, and we'll put in some brackets. We'll say address is, maybe just address with a colon, right, and a backslash n, right? And then maybe some kind of line that we're going to make. So we're just making a console application, which we're going to add in just a line with a bunch of pluses. Okay. Some kind of decorator there with a backslash n, because we're going to go to the new line, right? All right, cool. And so we got a city name, number, blah, blah. Here's my address. Okay, but now we're not finished. We have to go where it says after the output, we're going to return output, right? Would you agree? That satisfies my string. It's all a string. It's just formatted, and I'm returning the output. This is why I'm not using printf. Printf is nice if you're going to print out. You could add that too. I can make it printf plus return nothing, right? But I want to return a string that gets added to a particular string. Right, so my return would print out. If I want to do a console.outwrite.writeLine, I could say console.outwrite.writeLine address.toString. Right, so I can print out that address.toString. Okay, so I've overridden the method. You can choose to put, this is optional, the override in this particular case, because it's part of the java.lang .object superclass, right? So I could choose to use it or not. If it's my own superclass and I want to override it for polymorphism, which we're going to cover later on, then it's mandatory, right, for most classes. All right, especially for abstract classes. Okay, so we've got this address class. Cool. I want to add it in. Let's go back to the resident now. I want to add an object of the address class in here, right? So let's do that. So I want to say private type is address, right? And we're going to say low underscore address, right? Now, here's the problem. I haven't instantiated my address yet, right? I haven't instantiated my address. Could I, I'm just asking, right? Could I instantiate it here so I could ask for an address? I could. It's not good practice though, right? I want to create a getter or a setter for my address, right? Remember, this is a more complicated example. So what could I do from a getter or a setter if I want to make a getter or a setter for my address? So I want to set the address. It's not required as a resident, but I want to make, that's going to be my methods that I'm going to make for this one. I want to set the address. I want to set the social insurance number once when I construct it, but never set it again. I might want to read it. I want to make a getter for my SIN, right? And I want to make a getter and setter for my address. How do I do that? So let's try this manually, right? So let's think about this. So I'll say getters and setters. Do it both ways. We did the automatic way. Let's do the normal way or the manual way. So I'll say public, right? For my getter, for my social insurance number, it's going to return, what is it going to return? It's going to return a string, right? And it's going to be basically going to be called getSyn. That's what it's going to be, right? It's going to return a string. And all I'm going to do in my getter for my syn, right, is I got to have a return, and it's going to return this dot underscore syn, right? So that's what it's going to return. This is cool, right? So I got my getter going. This is my first getter, right? And now I want to make a getter and a setter for my my address. Let's do this. So here's my setter for my address. Okay, so public. Now, what am I going to return, right? I'm going to return, right, when I set my address. I don't need to return anything. It's void because I'm setting something, right? So I'm going to say void, right? And it's set address. That's what I'm going to do it here, right? Set my address. And I'm doing it in my residence class. I could have done it also in my address class. I could have created a set address, which does the same thing, but we're just doing it here. Right, and let's add this in here as something I want to do. So let's think about what I want to set. I want to say, well, when I do my set class, it's going to ask me for the inputs, right? So I want to do this here inside my, almost like the method header, right? I want to set these different things in here. So I want to ask for, again, going back to this, right, all this stuff. But instead of putting all this in here, right, I'm just going to copy the address thing for a second just to be quick. Copy. Go back to my resident class, and I'm going to basically put paste, right? And I'm just going to get rid of this. So all I've done is copy the information that I would normally get from my constructor, right, which is right here, right? And then you're like, hold on a second, though. Hold on, right? Hold on. Why do I need to do that? Because all I need to do is instantiate an object of that class, if that's what I'm going to do. So let me undo that. Right? So how do I do it? How do I set my address, right, by getting information? I could ask for it here, right? So this is the one thing I got to do. So I could do this, right? I could do this, but I need to do the new address thing anyway. So if I do this, make sure that's okay, right? I could do this, right? But I need to do this dot underscore address then is equal to a new address, right? That's what I need to do first, new type of address. And I need to pass in all this information, right? This stuff here, right? I don't need the types because I'm getting the types in. Copy this, put it in here, paste it, right? And I don't need to do the types, so I can get rid of the types. So street number, street name, and city name. The reason why I don't need the types is because I already have them up here in my in the method signature, right? So there we go. Okay, so that's really it in a nutshell, isn't it? All I have to do is this. I create a new object of the address class, right? And now this address class is part of my my object. Okay, cool. This is an easy way to do it, right? Setting the objects. I haven't asked I haven't accessed this yet. Okay, I'm just setting it here somehow. Right? Here's the option I want to ask you now. How do I show the address? I want to get the address. Well, I'm good. I have an address I've already created. So I'm going to say public. Here's my getter. Right? I'm going to return string. Right? So I'm going to return string. And it's going to return, I'm going to get address. Here's my get address, right? And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to say, hey, return this dot address, underscore address, dot toString, right? I have that method that I wrote in my address, right? And I'm good to go. That's why we wrote the toString method in the address class, so we can output it here in my resident class. So again, a more complicated example, but I wanted to give you that. So we've got composition here, right? We've got composition because I'm using, when I say composition, I've made an address class here that I've defined, and I'm using an object at underscore address in my resident subclass, right, to create an object here, right? This is what composition is all about, right? Any questions around what I've done? Now we need a driver to create our resident right? So let's do go into our program side. And by the way, just to get you guys to catch up, I'll go to, I've added a new address class and a resident class. So let's put that in there. So I'm going to go to team. I'm going to go to commit, and I'll put that in there. Added resident and address classes, right? By the way, my address class can also work for businesses, right? Corporations, right? Non-residents, right? So that's a good use of a class. I can reuse that code over and over again, right? And let's go commit and push. Okay, cool. So there we go. I've got you guys have that. Now, how do I use this? I want to create a person or a resident class, a resident, right? Which is a subclass of a person class. So how do I do that? So I can say, well, resident, right? And I call this, maybe I'm a resident, so it's me. So my name is, Tom, or let's make it resident for now. So lowercase resident, right, is equal to new resident. And if I go to open up the bracket and control enter, it tells me I need to enter in the name, the age, the height in inches, and so on, right? All that stuff that I can add. That's what it's asking me to put in there, right? So that's why I'm creating a new object, right? So let's try this out. So I need my name, my age. So I'm going to put in my name, so Tom, and my age, which is an integer. And I have my height in inches and my weight in pounds. Height in inches, I'm going to estimate them at 80. Not true. No, it's impossible. Let's just go 6 times. I'm 6 feet tall. 6 times 12, right? Is what is it? 5 times 12, so 72, right? And my weight in pounds is too much, but let's just say I'm a sleek 175, right? Which is not true, right? I would like to be that. And how come it's giving me an error? Like, what do I, did I miss anything? How do I know, right? Well, it says the constructor resident string int is undefined. I don't have that string int. Was that? Floats. So 46 is here. So how do I make this a float? So 72.0 I could put in there. That would kind of cover some of it. What about 175.0? Would that be enough? Huh? Yeah. I'm missing what? Oh, sin. So that would be a sin. So let's say 555, 555, 5555, right? Would that be enough? How come it's not? How come it's erroring out? Let's see what this says. It says the constructor resident string int double string is undefined. How come they're taking this doubles? How can I change this to floats? F. So I got to put F. Now I'm good, right? So I've got some information here. I've created my constructor as a resident, and now I want to print out my address. So I'm going to say, first of all, I want to check out some stuff. Because this is to prove inheritance, I want to be able to make my resident run, right? So can my resident run? I would say yes. So I'll say resident dot runs. Okay. Can you run? Huh? We do. It's part of our thing. How about eats? Eats there. Eats is there because eats was redefined. We define eats. So resident eats, right? We have walks, eats, and we have other things, right? The resident eats. And how about this? I want the resident address, resident dot get address. I want to get the address of the resident, right? See how this works, right? So I want to get those two things. I want to get he eats, or whoever it is, and I want to get their address, right? Now remember, eats doesn't exist. This is just part of the thing, right? It exists in the person class. We've defined an eats, right? An eats method. Here it is, but it's not in the residence class. But because it's inheriting using the extends keyword, the person class, it inherits all of its properties from the person class. Plus, it specializes and adds its own, right? Plus, it adds some information. If we compose one of our instance variables is an object of the address class. We're using here in this resident class, we're using both inheritance and composition, right? one more thing we're going to do later on tonight is we're going to use inheritance, composition, and an interface, right? So we're going to talk about how to add all those pieces in, right? All right, let's save this thing for a second, and let's quickly go to check it out, right? We'll go to I'll go to the program, right, in here, and this is plus run, and let's see what I get. Oh, I got an error. Okay, well, what's the error? Let's see what the error I get. It says exception in thread main Java null pointer exception. My program main, Tom is eating, and then I get a null pointer exception. Why would I get a null pointer exception here? Anybody have an information as to why? Not initialized, right? I didn't initialize the address ever. So how can I use an address? How can I get an address if I don't set it first? That's what it's saying. Now I would normally do something like this. I would check to see if it's initialized first. And then if I try to get the address, I might do some kind of try catch that says, hey, your address is not initialized. How do I do that? Well, I would go do that in the resident class where I'm doing this, where I do this get address. I would do a try catch. Let's do this, try, right? And actually, if we don't know what the thing is, if I go try and control space, I could try doing this. I can do a block of stuff like this. Here's my try catch. And what I want to do is return. So I'm going to kind of cut this out, put it in my try. And here's my exception. So there's exception handling again. We're going to do something like this. System or return. Actually, we're going to return this. We're going to return this is an error, right? That's what's returning a string, right? So we're going to say error address not initialized. Oops. That's our catch exception, right? So that'll be cool. So we fixed this. Let's go back to program.java and see what I'm doing here. Tell me what else I'm doing as an error in a second. Okay, I'm gonna run it, and I get Tom is eating. Hey, where's my address? How come? I'm not even getting an access here. Well, because I'm not really doing anything with it. I got to pump this out. This actually is getting a string, right, for the address. It's not showing my address. I don't have a show address method. I have a get address method, right? So in order for me to do that, I'd have to do a system.out.println because it's going to return a string. That's what it is. There's different ways I could write this, by the way. And then put this thing here inside of this as an output. Right? That works, right? Because my system, my resident.get address returns a string, right? If you hover over it, it tells me string, right? Now let's try it, see what happens. Boom, right? Tom is eating, error, address is not initialized, which is good. That's my output for my try catch block. Let's initialize. So how do I do that? I'm going to say resident.set address, and it's going to ask me for stuff. If I do a set address, because it's a setter, it gives me all this information, these kind of default settings here to set this off. So here's my street number, which is a string. So I'm going to say, let's say 55, and we'll say 55th Street. 55th Street, if there's such a place. In Toronto, sure, why not? And in Ontario, and by the way, we could have had some, for our import, we could have had some stuff to say Ontario or Ontario short form, right? In fact, we could have made another, here's something we could have done. You're gonna kill me for this one. I could have used composition even further to create an enum, right, that shows province names, Ontario, and so on, or whatever, an enumeration, or some kind of other structure, like that has final names, right, in there that shows my province names, right? I could have done that. But let's just leave it as low as Ontario. So I've set my address. This is good. I've satisfied my requirements for my set address method. And now when I go print, it goes, Tom is eating, addresses 55th Street, Toronto, Ontario, right? So that's kind of what it does, right? And this is cool because, I've done a couple things here just to finish off this one, right? And then we'll come back and do a bit of PowerPoint, and then we'll go away and come back later on tonight. For people who don't want to come in, don't worry. I'm going to be broadcasting. I will be physically here, right? Again at 6:30, right? For tonight, 6:30, 8:30. I'm going to be broadcasting and recording everything as best I can. Sometimes the recording fails, right? As I've seen. But please, if you can make it out, come out. If you can't make it out and you want to do it from home, that's cool too. All right, so let's save this one and then start another one just on the PowerPoint. So this is our demo for today.